Hi, this is Kevin McLaughlin from the Acme team, and in this podcast I'd like to discuss how to analyse your learning outcomes. And by the end of this podcast you'll be able to discuss pros and cons of analysing quantitative versus qualitative learning outcomes and the potential benefits of combining these outcomes in a mixed methods analysis. Historically, those assessing learning outcomes existed in two separate camps with different philosophies on the truth about learning and how best to capture this. The first camp ascribed to the positivist view of a single reality that learners either achieved the desired level of mastery of learning content or they didn't. By quantifying learners' performance, we can capture what they have learned, and by comparing this to an absolute or relative standard that is considered to represent the minimally acceptable performance level, we can infer a seemingly objective truth about who has learned enough to be considered competent and who has not. The second camp, the constructivists, believe that there are multiple truths about the degree of learning in response to a learning experience, and that these can only be captured by analysing the narratives of the individual learners qualitatively. Those in the constructivist camp feel that learning cannot be reduced to a score of 75% on an MCQ or 3 on a 5-point Likert scale, and that we need rich narrative data to assess not only what was learned, but also to understand how learning occurred and why. Over the past 40 years or so, a third camp, referred to as pragmatism, has grown, and this camp believes that quantitative and qualitative methods of assessing learning outcomes should not be seen as competing. Instead, these different approaches to assessing learning outcomes can be complementary and provide a more complete understanding of the process of learning. The pragmatist camp ascribes to the view that depending upon our intended use argument, it may be appropriate to focus on the analysis of either quantitative data or qualitative data, or to integrate both types of data in the form of a mixed methods analysis. Assuming that you're still at the planning phase of your program, we would typically recommend that you prepare to gather and analyse both quantitative and qualitative learning outcomes for a couple of reasons. Number one, medical training is best viewed as a complex adaptive system where unexpected positive and negative learning outcomes occur, and it's important to have data that helps to address how and why these outcomes arose. And number two, since we're always looking for ways to improve the quality of a program, knowing the how and why of learning outcomes can serve as an express needs assessment for future iterations of your program. If you're planning to gather both quantitative and qualitative outcome data, then you should also decide the order in which you will gather these and how you will integrate these two types of data. This article provides a nice and succinct overview of when to consider mixed methods analysis of learning outcomes and how to integrate quantitative and qualitative data analysis that can help with triangulation and providing a more complete understanding of learning outcomes. A convergent mixed methods design is when we gather both sources of data at the same time. For example, if we have a numerical rating of performance on an OSCE station and gather free text comments from OSCE raters at the same time. Alternatively, we could ask trainees to complete an end-of-course survey where they rate the quality of the learning experiences, and we also ask for narrative description on how they use these experiences to guide their learning during the course. In both of these settings, we can also capture unanticipated outcomes, including mistreatment or professionalism concerns. In an explanatory sequential mixed methods design, we start with quantitative analysis and follow this with qualitative data collection and analysis to try and explain the numerical results by adding the how and why of learning. Qualitative data can be via questionnaires sent to trainees, but is more commonly in the form of focus groups to identify themes that can explain the process and outcomes of learning in your program. Ideally, this should be planned in advance, particularly if this is a new program, but can also occur ad hoc if there are unanticipated outcomes, particularly when there are negative or discordant findings. In this study, the authors decided to change the delivery of the hepatology content in the undergraduate curriculum from a traditional lecture to a flipped classroom approach, while keeping the teacher learning content and assessment fixed. Their stated objective was to explore the impact of the change in delivery on learning outcomes, and they planned the convergent mixed methods analysis. Based upon their quantitative analysis, the switch to the flipped classroom improved learning outcomes with a significant increase in performance of learners, albeit with a small effect size. But the reaction from learners was less encouraging, as is captured in these two quotes. And this negative reaction was also evident in the ratings of the quality of the learning experiences, which were significantly lower with a large effect size. The authors subsequently completed focus group interviews and discovered how preparing for the flipped classroom had required more effort and more independent learning from students, which explained why this led to both reduced enjoyment and improved performance on the assessment. The final design is exploratory sequential mixed methods, where we begin with qualitative data analysis, and based upon the themes identified here, we plan to gather and analyze quantitative data. This is particularly helpful for a new program where we can use focus groups to decide important learning outcomes and identify variables related to learners, teachers, or the learning context that may impact learning. After this, we can create a questionnaire or some other form of numerical assessment, and based upon these data, we can perform more sophisticated quantitative analysis to explore if and how potential explanatory variables impact learning outcomes. When deciding on whether to include mixed methods analysis of learning outcomes in your program, you should consider costs such as time and resources, and whether you have the methodological expertise to perform and integrate both types of analyses. If you can include both quantitative and qualitative data analysis, this will undoubtedly provide a more complete understanding of the learning process and outcomes, including capturing unanticipated learning outcomes, as well as identifying ways to improve future iterations of your program. And if you're unsure on how to develop a questionnaire or conduct a focus group interview, then there is a podcast in Phase 5 of the Acme tool entitled How to Support the Validity of Your Program Evaluation that can help you develop these tools. Thank you for viewing this podcast. I hope you found it helpful, and please reach out if you have any questions or suggestions on how to improve the Acme tool.